Procedure, please refer back to your preliminary jury instructions. Are you only allowed to testify about a client's conversations with their consent?
Yes. And just to clarify for the jury, a consent form is signed by the client and they are instructed and informed that they do not have the same degree of confidentiality that they would have if they were being treated as a patient, and that anything that is said in the interview could be used in a report which will be handed into the court.
In the fight or flight scenario, does the body choose either to fight or flee?
That depends largely on the circumstances. The impulse is, there's a tendency for the impulses to flee. But in the event that you can flee, or if there are opportunities to protect yourself in a more direct fashion, then that tendency may evolve. But the tendency is to flee for most circumstances.
Can both occur at the same time?
Yes, we see that type of behavior. We saw it in this particular case as well, where there was an attempt to flee and at the same time...
He's answering the question.
Overruled. You may continue.
Thank you. Where a person then flees to a point where they can no longer flee, and therefore another set of self-survival behaviors kicks in. And so, yes, they can occur not necessarily simultaneously, but in a successive fashion.
Can memories blocked in a fight or flight event return over time, or are they forever lost?
If the hippocampus is truly flooded and shut down by the presence of these various chemicals that are rushed into the brain through the amygdala, unlikely those memories can ever be restored because they were never there to begin with. Sometimes memories can be restored if there's something there that you might be able to work on. But here, they were not recorded. It's as if you had a digital recording, let's say, and there was something wrong with the memory. It wouldn't be there.
How can we be certain that your assessment of Ms. Arias is not based on the lies that she has admittedly made over the years?
The diagnosis of PTSD is a function of a evaluation based upon, in my case, 35 years of experience in working with individuals with PTSD. You look at the fact pattern, you look at the circumstances that occurred at the time of the trauma, you look to see from the diagnostic list which of these characteristics are presented by the client, and it is on that you make your diagnosis. And I can say that with an all reasonable psychological probability, she does meet the criteria for post-traumatic stress disorder.
Did you use hypnosis on Ms. Arias to attempt to recover her memory?
No, I did not.
To your knowledge, did anyone else use hypnosis on Ms. Arias to attempt to recover her memory?
Not to my knowledge.
During the fight or flight reaction, do you believe it is possible that these memories do in fact exist?
Well, I'm basing my assumption on what I know about the physiology of memory, and it is less likely that memories are formed during that state of excitement and arousal. So
Experience could draw from photos, journals, videos, and other methods. Could they not extract some old, lost, or forgotten memories?
All right, we're going to hit the pause button again, so you will not miss a moment here of testimony. And already the key question, is your assessment based on of 100 questions? Let's listen in.
During the fight or flight reaction, do you believe it is possible that these memories do in fact exist?
Well, I'm basing my assumption on what I know about the physiology of memory, and it is less likely that memories are formed during that state of excitement and arousal. So I would have to say there's a high probability that the memories do not exist. They never existed.
If someone with that experience could draw from photos, journals, videos, and other methods, could they not extract some old, lost, or forgotten memories?
What happens sometimes is that people begin to read about what happened to them, and they hear stories from people who were there at the time of the incident, whatever that is. They may see photographs of what happened. They may begin to incorporate that information and form pseudo-memories that aren't real memories. They may begin to learn about the incident, but not from first-hand memories. But the strange thing about human memory is that we can sometimes be, they can sometimes are called implanted memories. And if you say things enough to an individual, especially children, you can actually get them to believe something that you've implanted, as opposed to having been a true memory experience for them. So it's possible, but unlikely, especially for adults.
Are there other psychologists or doctors in your field who have differing opinions on the items you testified about, or is there 100% consensus in your field?
In psychology, there's never 100% consensus except in the rarest of circumstances. We usually couch our diagnoses and our assumptions and our theories and our hypotheses in terms such as in all reasonable psychological probability. Unlike some areas of medicine where if there was an appendicitis attack, you can actually go in and see that damaged appendix, remove it, and you now know the person does not have an appendix any longer. Psychology is not that precise. So we need to couch things in terms of probabilities as opposed to absolutes.
I believe you said acute stress disorder can be diagnosed within 2 months of the stress event, and you also said you diagnosed Ms. Arias with this, yet you didn't have your first discussion with her until 2009, more than 6 months after the event. Please clarify.
I will. I was able to diagnose Ms. Arias with post-traumatic stress disorder, which, as I indicated earlier, within all reasonable psychological probability, she was suffering from at the time that I evaluated her. Now, it's important to note that the diagnosis of post-traumatic stress disorder is not a get-out-of-jail-free diagnosis. It's simply a statement that describes her emotional state at the time that the evaluation occurred. But the fact is that post-traumatic stress disorder is frequently connected to someone having undergone an acute stress reaction. You go up to Flagstaff, Arizona, and you see the giant meteor crater. Well, it was not always known that that was a meteor crater. For hundreds of years, I'm sure the people that lived there, having no scientific background and experience, believed it to be a depression in the earth. As people began to investigate that, it became more apparent, as knowledge began to accrue, that a meteorite actually hit the surface of the earth, forming that crater. The crash of the meteorite in Arizona, maybe 150,000 years ago, I believe, was the equivalent of the acute stress disorder. The crater that's in the ground is the equivalent of the diagnosis of post-traumatic stress disorder. Again, it's not an excuse, and it's not a get-out-of-jail-free card, but it's something that describes what had happened before and gives us the impetus to go back and explore and to look and see what happened during the time of the trauma. And from that, we can infer that the trauma was of significant nature, of significant enough nature, that it could very likely have led to amnesia, dissociative amnesia, from that experience.
Can't believe he said get out of jail free card.
Interesting choice of words there, talking about not a get out of jail free card. Might want that one back. All right, we're listening to him. Jury question.
Tests were given at the end of December of 2009 and the beginning of January 2010.
Can you be sure Jodi is not lying to you about the events on June 4, 2008?
Not with 100% certainty. I can't say that. However, when you look at the repeated stories, several different times asked the same question. The story was not 100% the same, but the basic aspects of the story were sufficient, and it seemed to, at least with certain elements, be consistent with the description of the crime scene. So I would say there's a very strong probability that once she finally told the right story, the second story, that she was being truthful at that time.
Would the shutdown of the hippocampus be affected by the level of control an individual has over the traumatic event? For example, a soldier intentionally bursts into a room to kill an individual versus an individual jumps out at a soldier on routine patrol.
Yes, in fact, if someone is trained specifically for combat, the likelihood of them developing a stress reaction at the time of a battle is significantly reduced, but not totally. And all you have to do is to look at the press releases and follow the television and radio reports and see the number of cases of post-traumatic stress disorder that occur with our trained military people. Earlier in the trial, I referred to a Time magazine article that was referring to a trained police veteran who was a trainer, actually, who himself was involved in a shooting incident or where he was threatened with a gun. And he had many of the characteristics of an acute stress disorder. So even with training, it doesn't guarantee that you won't react with acute stress, but it does reduce your probability.
Regarding the events of June 4, 2008, do you feel Jodi had suppressed memories, or are they missing entirely?
It depends. Now, I can't measure that because we don't have the tools. We don't have a psychological MRI, for example, to check to see what memories truly exist. But based upon what is known about acute stress disorder and what is known about the neurology of memory formation, I would say it's highly unlikely that she has true memories of what occurred during that period of time when she was in acute distress.
If you feel she had suppressed memories, did you try hypnosis? If not, why?
In the case of dissociative amnesia, the memories are not there to bring back. Now, as I indicated, I have been asked by police departments at various times to try to use hypnosis. I've used it a few times. It's generally not all that helpful. It's because in cases of dissociative amnesia, the memories aren't there. Yet, it has been successful a few times, especially for officers to try to remember more clearly the description of the particular perpetrator that was involved in the interaction that they were having. I would say the probability of success is relatively small, and I generally don't use it for those purposes anymore because it was simply not cost effective.
As a professional, what steps do you take to assure yourself that someone has truly lost their memory or suppressed their memory as opposed to simply lying about an event?
You have to look at the surrounding information. I have no way of being 100% sure that what we're dealing with here is dissociative amnesia, and yet all the evidence strongly suggests that within all reasonable probability, this is what happened. The reason we say this is because over the years, a great deal of research has been conducted on people who have been in similar situations, and there are consistent reports of dissociative amnesia occurring. It's a true phenomenon. It's not something made up. In fact, 30% of people convicted of homicide report amnesia, and it depends upon the nature of the killing. So I'm pretty confident that we can be fairly certain that she does suffer from amnesia for that period of time of the acute stress.